All right, let's shift gears and let's talk about data. So both, I've obviously, Cheryl, you and Teresa and Glenn have all talked, and Brian, about, what's needed, all these different funds. What data specifically is needed? Let's say you get the politician's recommendation and endorsement, but what data is required to be most successful in getting this funding?
Depends on the grant, right? So if you're talking about a state grant, they may want to look at things like your demographics, like, poverty and rurality and population density and, education levels and unemployment, like a variety of things like that. On some of the big federal programs, it really is, are you, unserved or underserved? And that is by program. And they have very specific definitions, like, ART Office 25.3, Reconnect was 10.1. The 10.1 requirement was, more than 90%, or at least 90% is unserved. ART Office completely unserved. So you just have to get into the fine details of the grant and make sure that you know what they are and that you're following them.
I think one of the biggest issues is the quality of the 477 data from the FCC. We were looking at Kentucky cities, 500 and some odd cities in Kentucky. By Reconnect standards, 2 of those cities are eligible for Reconnect. Kentucky probably has 30 to 40% of the population that can't even get a signal. So the problem that we have been trying to tackle is figuring out how can we put in a very public way information that says, I am eligible, instead of you cannot apply. I think that is the fundamental issue that is going to go forward over the next couple of years. If the FCC gets it right, and I have no reason to believe they can or even know how, that would be great. But a lot of rural America is already completely blocked from grant applications because of the quality of their data. What we've seen coming out of NTIA and even your wonderful state of Colorado is not exactly what we would consider to be appropriate for the communities that need services. And forgive me, Teresa.
Well, no, Glenn, I'll fall under the bus on that one. We beg. All we can do is beg for reported data. We can collect the 477 data that is self-reported, typically marketing information. It is not granular level, verifiable data. So the states are basically just held captive to the data that they can possibly get from the FCC's 477 data collection. And then we try to do our best at identifying and collecting data that supplements that. Our GIS team collects data from all the companies that will willingly give it to us twice a year to try to make those maps look better, Glenn, and more representative. But I've just got to say, 2 things to add to that. Every time I go out into the Western Slope or the Eastern Plains, my constituents chew my backside because my farmers and my ranchers say, why are you agreeing to this 25.3, Teresa, as a broadband standard? So when we get back to data and we get back to that, what I think they need to start looking at, Nick, and I think we're moving that way because of COVID. We've got to change the metric of what broadband is, because that is not a use case. People cannot use 3 up. That is not functional for telemedicine, telework, or teleeducation, period. But what we're also seeing in many of these grant applications and the priorities that are being given, is the service a use case based bandwidth solution? And are there digital equity or low income programs that those recipients, those ISPs are offering? Because even if you build it, if people can't afford it, then you've still got the disconnect. So that digital equity is starting to creep into grading metrics on all of these programs. You'll be seeing that more and more. So that's another data point, Nick, that they'll be putting into these grant award checklists.
I think Teresa says something interesting there. They have a GIS team in Colorado. Some states have nothing. They don't spend money on mapping at all. So Colorado at least has done a job of mapping, and that's a very difficult terrain to map. It's
See,
not
states getting it done.
Getting it done. That's your new tagline.
Getting it done.
Colorado,
Well,
getting it done.
We just had an issue, and Glenn, we worked on it too, where in Colorado, we realized that the county gave us a bunch of addresses. They were geocoded, but they wouldn't line up on the map. And so we talked to Glenn about it, and then we ultimately also then went back to the Colorado OIT office and talked to the GIS group, and they had the same issue. It was like, wow, there is an issue, and we actually tracked it all the way back to Google, right? So what was helpful in that, because we actually hadn't seen that before, was that then they helped us validate that it was incorrect, and then helped give us the guidance. And Learn, Design, Apply is also helping on this grant too, to really give us the guidance that validated, one, the issue, and then told us what to also include into the grant submission, so it would be looked at, and then and then they were also already involved, right? So we had them involved. Cheryl's team helped us get involved with them in terms of a suggestion. They were very helpful. Glenn also validated the issue. We had two different people validate it, and then ultimately they knew about it, right? And then said, put this information, the specific information into the grant. So everyone knew about it. It wasn't going to get this thing discarded, but we needed to show what was served and unserved, and we needed to pull some business addresses out of it. And everything wasn't quite lining up. At first, we thought everything was just off 700 feet to the east, but that was only about 60% of the data. It was just a very odd thing, right? And we had never seen that before. We didn't know what to do. So with guidance from, the team, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Funny footnote this morning. I got a call from one of your folks who was doing some further diagnostics on that issue. And what he discovered is if you put on an address that could be on the street, but isn't on the street, like you've got the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but there's no 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on that street, the geocoding is perfect. But if it's a known house, a real address, the geocoding is
Makes no sense. That's crazy. That's crazy.
It makes sense, but it's a convoluted reason why. But
well, that sounds like our Dr. Dave must have given you a call.
This is the advantage, though, of the hometown provider, because so I'll give you an example. We're working on some grant applications today, and my brother and I are partners in this business, and there's a few of us here that own shares, and it's a really tight group. But the point is, he started in the field for us, 12 years ago. And so he's bumped into everybody. He's been to homes, he's been to dinners in 5, 6 different counties. And so today we're talking about an area, and he said, oh, so-and-so owns some land up there, and I know they have power up there for a stock tank, right? That is huge. When you're talking about mapping, people that are applying for funding for an area that's not familiar with the area, it is impossible, right? But knowing who owns a stock tank and who's going to be a friendly person that we can buy an easement from or record it with the county, huge.
Tribal knowledge.
That's right.
Well, it's local heroes, guys. It's the local champion. I mean, that's what we talk about all the time. This problem is going to be solved at the local level. That's why, I don't know if you guys have seen it or not, but Senator Bennett just introduced the Bridges Act that's going to allocate about $30 billion to states directly to be able to address the issues that we know, right, Brian? We know, and Glenn, we know where broadband isn't. We have, these chronically unserved areas, but with our state program, we can't focus money. We have to wait for applications to come in. And so we're very excited about the Bridges Act because it would give states the ability to solve our own problems. The government, feds print it, but we're going to get to put it where it needs to go to work, better, efficient. And
the question was asked earlier, how does a provider position themselves for this kind of funding? I would contend that if a provider has not positioned themselves for CARES is tough, but there's going to be 2 more CARES Act after CARES, right? To the point, whether it's the Bridges Act or the one before the House, there's going to be additional funding next year and the year after until we solve this problem.
Well, and I would tell you too, there's going to be stimulus money, much like you had with the ARA funding in the Obama administration. I mean, once we get through the pandemic, then we have to get our economy back on its feet, and they're going to invest heavily in infrastructure. Broadband is going to be right in the middle of that. So this funding isn't going away anytime soon.
Yeah.